Yeah, so good morning to everyone. Okay, so let us begin today's lecture. Okay, so, as I said in the last lecture, that we have completed the first part of the course. So, this was on regular languages and finite state automaton. So, regular languages are one class of languages. Uh, so, what is a language, right? So, language is a set of strings over an alphabet, and a regular language are languages which are accepted by finite state automatons, right? So in general, like this sets of strings, right, or languages would generally be an infinite set of strings, but we have finite representations of this infinite set of strings. Right? So, for example, right, so we saw various regular languages which were infinite, but these regular languages have finite representations in the form of either finite state automatons, either be deterministic or non-deterministic, and regular expressions, right? Uh, so these are finite representations of an infinite set of strings which obey certain properties. Okay. However, we also saw that regular languages have limitations. So there are many important languages which are not regular. Right? So for example, right, so we saw this language 0 and 1. So this language is not regular, but this is a useful language, right? Because, for example, uh, let's say that you want to express programs, right? So as I said, one of the main practical applications of this course is to express syntax of programming languages. So whenever you write a program, right, you use this curly braces, right? Uh, in order to uh, in order to form block of code. Okay? And if you look at this curly braces, right? So you can take 0 to be the opening curly brace and then 1 to be the closing curly brace. Then in a correct program, right? In a program that is syntactically correct, for every opening brace there must be a closing brace, right? And they must be properly nested. So in that sense, right, this language 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n is exactly uh, the set of correct programs, right, uh, would basically have to include this language 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n. So that's why we have to move beyond regular languages now. So we need to find out uh, whether or not there are finite representations of this kind of a language. Right? Of a language is 0 to the power n, 1 to the power n, which is not regular, and whether or not uh, we can actually even come up with a machine, right, which can accept these type of languages. Okay. So that's a brief motivation for the second part of this course, which is on context-free languages, right? So so context-free languages are another class of languages, and we will see that this language, right, for example, uh, is a context-free language, and context-free languages have two finite representations. So just like regular languages had finite state automaton and regular expressions as their finite representations, context-free languages also have two finite representations. So the first representation is a context-free grammar, okay, which is a finite representation of a context-free language, and the second representation, which we'll study later, is a push-down automaton, which is an automaton with a stack. So first we will look at what are context-free grammars, right? And uh, in particular, right, we will consider formal representation of context-free grammars. Also look at this concept of derivations. Okay. Uh, so as I said, a context-free grammar, right, informally is a representation. There is a notation for describing languages. Right? So it is a finite representation of a language, which is an infinite set of strings. Right? However, these context-free grammars are more powerful than finite automaton or regular expressions. Right? So finite automaton and regular expressions are also finite representations of infinite languages uh, of an infinite set of strings. Right? However, they have limitations. Right? So they cannot define all languages. So context-free grammars can define more languages than finite automaton or regular expressions. Right? However, even context-free grammars are limited, right? Because they also cannot define all possible languages, right? In the sense that just like there are languages which are not regular, there are languages which are not context-free as well. So we will, so that will be the third part of this course, right? Where we'll look at languages which are not context-free as well. Right? However, many important languages, right, are actually context-free. So as I said, one of the examples of a useful language which is context-free is the nested structure, right? The parentheses which are present in programming languages. So so this particular language is context-free, and there are many other examples of useful languages as well which are also context-free. So the main idea behind this context-free grammars, right, is that is this very simple notion, right, that these languages, right, or the strings can be formulated in a recursive fashion. So for example, right, let's take this 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n. So we know that this language is not regular, so there doesn't exist a finite state automaton or a regular expression describing this language, right? However, if you notice this language, right, so you can easily enumerate strings in this language in a recursive fashion, right? So if so any string in this language, right, is going to begin with a 0 and it's going to end with a 1. And if you remove the first 0, right, the 0 at the beginning and the 1 at the end, then the resulting string is also a string in this language. Okay? So what I'm saying is that if you remove a 0 from the beginning, right, and if you remove a 1 from the end, then you will get 0 to the power n minus 1 and 1 to the power n minus 1. But this is also a string in the language. Right? So which means that you can now generate strings, right, in this language in an inductive or recursive fashion. So for example, you will start with the empty string. Okay? So the empty string is in the language. Okay? And then if some string w is in the language, then if you add a 0 at the beginning and a 1 at the end, then this string is also in the language, right? So if w is in the language, so let's say L is this language, 0. Then if W, then epsilon belongs to L. And if W belongs to L, then the 0 W1 also belongs to L. And in fact, this is the only way in which you can generate strings in this language, right? So if you actually use this methodology, right, then you will be able to generate all the strings in the language, and whatever strings that you generate will be in this language alone, right? So, right, so context-free grammars basically formalize this notion, right, of how to recursively generate strings. So, as I said, so the basic idea, right, that is used, right, is that we use variables for to stand for set of strings, and these variables are then defined recursively in terms of one another. So, for example, we would have a variable which stands for strings of this language L, and then we will say that okay, uh, uh, if this particular string is in the language, then if you add a 0 at the beginning and a 1 at the end, then the resulting string is also in the language, which means that the resulting string will also be defined by this variable, right? So that's why these variables are defined recursively in terms of one. So we use recursive rules or productions which involve only concatenation, and there are also rules which allow for union. So this is just an informal introduction to context-free grammars. Right? So we'll formalize this later, but but this is the main motivation, right, or behind context-free grammars, which is that which is this observation, right, that these languages can be defined recursively, right? Uh, and we can use this inductive or recursive formulation as a finite representation of the language. So as I said, context-free grammars, context-free languages have many practical applications, right? And uh, so context-free grammars play a central role in compiler design, right? So most the syntax of most of the programming languages can be expressed in the form of a context-free grammar. And furthermore, right, this results in simplification of the task of writing parsers for any programming language. So if you write a program in say C or Java, right, or any such language, then a compiler, the first thing that a compiler does, right, is to check whether or not the program follows the syntactic rules of the language. So the syntactic rules of the language are expressed in the form of context-free grammars, and then there is this component of the compiler which is called a parser, uh, whose job uh, is to determine whether or not the program follows the syntactic rules of the language, right? So this task of writing of writing parsers is significantly simplified with the help of this context-free grammars. So in particular, right, if you can, so there are tools which are called parser generators, which just take as input a context-free grammar, right? And then as an output they produce a parser for the language uh, that is represented by this grammar. So which means that if say you want to create a new programming language, right, then all you have to do is write down the syntax of the programming language as a context-free grammar, uh, and then this parser generators would automatically generate the parser, which would take any string, right, and figure out whether or not the string belongs in the language that is represented by the context-free grammar. So we have already informally seen, right, that how this particular language, right, 0 to the power n, 1 to the power n, where n is greater than or equal to 0, uh, can be uh, can be generated recursively. Right? So all the strings in this language can be generated recursively. Okay? So let's now sort of formally see, right, what the context-free grammar for this language would look like. Right? So as I said, we will use variables, right, which are also called non-terminals, in order to uh, represent strings of this language. Uh, so there are two. So s is this variable, right? So we say that so here s is the variable which represents string of the language. Okay, and then we have this production rules, right? Which say that so there are two production rules here. Right? So this correspond to the base case and the inductive case, right? So the base case is that from S we can generate the epsilon, and then for the inductive case is that from S we can generate 0 as 1. This is the same as saying that epsilon is in the language, right? And if some string W is in the language, then 0 W1 is also in the language. So these are the production rules, right? That generate strings in this language. So So as I said, the basis is that epsilon is in the language, and the induction is that if W is in the language, then 0 W1 is also in the language. So let's look at another example. So let's consider this language of palindromes. Right? So a palindrome is a string which, if you read it forwards or you read it backwards, right, is the same. Which means that so let's consider W in 0 1 star, such that W is equal to WR, right? Where this WR is the reversal of this particular string. Okay, so this language, is this language regular? Okay, so when it is saying it's not regular, yeah, so that's correct. Right? So this language is not regular. So you can use the pumping lemma, right, in order to prove that this language is not regular. But let's try to now generate or let's try to determine the finite representation of this language in the form of a context-free grammar. Okay, so how would you recursively generate strings in this language? Okay. Uh, so let's start with the base cases, right? So we know that epsilon, for example, is in the language. Okay. What else can we say? So uh, so let's say that some string W is in the language. Then so which means that if W when read from the forwards or the backwards is the same. Okay. So how can we generate more strings which are palindromes, right? By possibly concatenating other strings to W. So like in the last case, right, where we said that we can append, we can basically add a 0 at the beginning and a 1 at the end, right, for the last language. Okay, so when it is saying that x, yeah, AWA or XWA, X, right? Okay. So since 0 and 1 are there, right? So if W is in the language, then 0W0 is in the language. And it also means that 1W1 is also in the language. Uh, and so this is because if you basically add a 0 at the beginning and a 0 at the end, right, then it means that if you read the string in reverse, right, it's the same. Similarly, if you add 1 at the beginning and a 1 at the end, then again, if you read it in reverse, then it remains the same. Okay. Okay. So is this all? So or are we missing something? Okay. So when it is saying 0 and 1. So notice that this will only generate strings of even length, right? So because we are adding 0 at the beginning and a 0 at the end, right? And similarly, we are adding a 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end. But we also need strings of odd length, right, which are palindromes, right? So that's why in the base case, so we have 0 and 1 as well. So 0 and 1 are also in the language. Okay. So epsilon 0 and 1 are in the language, and if W is in the language, then 0W0 is in the language, and 1W1 is also in the language. Okay. So now we can express this in the form of a grammar, right? So we will use a variable in order to represent the strings of the language. So let's use this variable s. Okay. So the base case would correspond to the rule that that s can generate epsilon or 0 or 1. Okay. And the inductive case would correspond to the fact that s can generate 0 as 0 or 1 as 1. And that's it, right? So this would mean that all the strings that can be generated by this variable s, that are represented by this variable s, would exactly correspond to the language of palindromes. In fact, yeah, this is what I would. So epsilon 0 and 1 are in the language. This is the base case. In the inductive case is that if W is in the language, then so are 0W0 and 1W1. Okay. So yeah, so this is the so this basically illustrates informally, right? Uh, how exactly to generate a context-free grammar, or how to determine how to write a context-free grammar for a language. Right? But we need to now formally define a context-free grammar. Right? So just like we defined a finite state machine, right, in the form of this phi tuple. We had the set of states, the start state, the transition function, the set of final states, and the alphabet. So similarly, we will also formally define a context-free grammar. So a context-free grammar, which we generally use the symbol G for this, is a four tuple, right? So it consists of four different elements, n, sigma, p, and s. Right? So let's see what are each of these elements. Right? So let's first of all look at the sigma. So the sigma is the same as the alphabet, right? The sigma that we had for in the case of regular languages, right? In the case of finite state automatons, right? So in the context of a CFG, right? This alphabet is also called a terminal. So here's a new terminology, right? So terminal. So terminal, which is represented by sigma, is nothing but the symbols of the alphabet of the language being defined. So in the last example, right, sigma was always equal to 0. Last couple of examples, sigma was this binary alphabet, right, 0 and 1. So it's also called terminals. And next we have this new notation n, right, which is the set of variables, right, which are also called non-terminals. So these are a finite set of other symbols, and each of which represents a language. So there are two set of symbols here, right? So there are terminals and then there are non-terminals. However, we are only defining strings over the terminals, right? The non-terminals are representations of sets of strings, right? Or representations of languages. That's why they're also called variables, right? we have this special symbol, which is the start symbol, which is given by S, which is the variable whose language is the one being defined. So in general, a contextual grammar can have many variables, okay? And each of these variables is going to define its own language. However, the language that is defined by the contextual grammar itself is the language of this variable S, which is the start symbol. And the last component is productions, right? So we have a production. So we saw the examples of production rules, right? So a production has the form variable, arrow, and a string of variables and other terminals. Okay? Uh, so the left-hand side is a a production rule has a left-hand side, an arrow, and then a right-hand side. So the left-hand side of the production rule is a single variable, right? A single non-terminal. And on the right hand side, we can have an arbitrary string of variables, non-terminals and terminals. So formally, right, this P, which is a set of production rules, right, is a subset of n cross n union sigma star, right? Uh, so look at this notation carefully, right? So this says that so we're taking this cross product of n, which is the set of non-terminals, and n union sigma star, right? So n union sigma, the whole star, is the set of strings, right, over variables and non-terminals. So you can take, so you can generate any finite string over variables and terminals, over non-terminals and terminals. And notice that for the same variable, right, you can have multiple production rules because this is a cross product. So in general, right, we will have a production rule of the form A generates alpha. Okay. So here A will be a variable, right, or a non-terminal, and alpha is the string of variables and terminals, non-terminals and terminals. Right? So A is generally called the head of the production rule, while alpha is called the body of the production rule. So we will use some convention here in naming the variables, terminal strings, and so on. Right. So in particular, right, we have two sets of symbols now. Right. So we have this non-terminals or variables and terminals. Right. So we'll generally use capitalized alphabets, capitalized uh, symbols of the English alphabet for variables. Right. So we'll use, for example, capital A, B, and C for variables, and small a, b, and c will be used for terminals or strings of the or symbols of the alphabet. However, there is a difference in that if you are using capital X, Y, Z, right, from the towards the end of the English alphabet, then they can be either terminals or variables. So this will be clear from the context itself. On the other hand, if you're using W, X, Y, Z, right? So small symbols from the or non-capitalized symbols from the end of the English alphabet, then they will be strings of terminals only. And finally, we'll use this Greek letters alpha, beta, and gamma for strings of terminals and variables. So this is this alpha, beta, and gamma will be used on the right hand side of production rules. So we have already seen this contextual grammar for 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n. Right? So let's also formally write it down in this language uh, that we have just defined. Okay. So there are four components here. So G consists of the first component is the set of variables, right? The set of non-terminals. So here there is just one non-terminal, which is S. The second component is this alphabet, right? Which in this case is the binary alphabet 0 and 1. The third component is the set of production rules. Right? So we'll see what are the production rules and how they're represented. And the fourth component is the start symbol. So in this case, it is the only non-terminal that's present in the grammar, which is S. So a production rule. So here there are two production rules. Okay? Formally, right, they are represented as these tuples, right, where the first component of the tuple is the variable on the left-hand side of the production rule, and the second component of the tuple is the string of uh, the string of variables, right, and terminals. So as I said, there are two production rules for this grammar. Right? So one is that S generates sigma, which is that this tuple S generates epsilon, which is this tuple S and epsilon. And the second component, the second production rule is S generates 0 as 1. So this would be this tuple. However, for writing production rules, we generally don't use this particular format. So we'll use the arrow representation, right, or the arrow notation for writing production rules. And in particular, right, uh, if you have multiple production rules where the same variable is on the left hand side of those production rules, then we can combine those together using this vertical bar. Okay, so this notation means that we have two production rules: S generates epsilon and S generates 0 as well. But you can combine them together and write it in this fashion. Okay. So far we have only defined the formal notation of a context tree grammar. So we have this informal idea, right, that we can use it in order to recursively generate or inductively generate strings of this language. But we also formally define how to find out the language of a context tree grammar, right? Uh, or how to precisely define, right, what does it mean when we say that a string is generated by the rules of the grammar. So before doing that, right? So let's also do this exercise, right? So let's try to write down a context tree grammar for expressions in a programming language. Right? So as I said, this is uh, uh, one of the main applications of context tree grammar, which is to express or to represent the syntax of a programming language. Right? So one of the components of a programming language are these expressions that we write. So for example, in C or Java or any other language, right? So we may use something like X is equal to Y plus one, right? Or Y is equal to Z into two, and things like that, right? So yeah, so these things, right, are called expressions. So whatever comes on the right hand side of assignment statements in a programming language are called expressions, right? So instead of so we will we'll just focus on the syntax of these expressions. So we'll try to write a context tree grammar for this kind of expressions. Right? So we'll assume that these expressions involve positive integers, variables, and only two operators, right, which is this plus and multiplication. So there are so there could be positive integers, that is, they are constants. There could be variables. So these are the variables of the programming language, and there could be operators, right, like plus and multiplication. So further, we will assume that these variables, right? So in general, variables in a programming language, right, can have any arbitrary name. So there are some rules, right, that they should not begin with some specific symbols and so on. But otherwise, right, uh, they are pretty much unrestricted, right? So we'll place a restriction on the names of the variables. Right? So we'll say that these variables in the programming language can only begin with this small a or small b, right? And they can only contain a, b, 0, and 1. So for example, like these are the type of variables that we're looking for. So A1, B11 or AB101. So they begin with either A or B, and they only contain AB, 0, and 1. But the length itself is unrestricted. So you can have arbitrary long variables. So what's the regular expression for variables, right? For the names of variables here. So notice that this name, the name of regular variables, or that the name of variables itself is a language. And in this case, it is a regular language. So in that case, you can define a regular expression, right, for this variable names. So what is this regular expression? Okay, so Vikram is saying, let me write this down. So a plus b, and then 0 plus 1 plus a plus b. star. Yeah, so this is correct. Right? So as we said, right, that this variable names only begin with either A or B, and after that, right, they can contain any number of 0, 1, A or B. So that's why this is the regular expression corresponding to the name of variables. So A plus B and then A plus B plus 0 plus 1 whole star. Okay. Right. So here are some example expressions, right, that we want to express. So as I said, you can use variable names, right, and uh, you can use positive integers or constants, and you can use the symbols addition and multiplication. Right? And in addition, you can also use parentheses. Right? So for example, a1 plus 9. Right? So this is something that you would use on the right hand side of an assignment statement, right, in a programming language. Right? So you might write a is equal to a1 plus 9 or something. So a1 plus 9 is uh, uh, is a member of this language. Right? So we are considering the language of expressions in a programming language, and A1 plus 9 is an expression that could be used in our programming language, right? Where we are restricted to this, the variable names are restricted, the symbols, the operators are restricted, and we are only considering positive integers. So another example is this A101 plus B1 into 100. Right? And now in the third example, we have used bracketing. So this is B1 plus 89 into A. And the fourth example, again, we have used parentheses. Right? So this is A plus B into A plus B. Okay. So these are some of the example expressions. Uh, so the first question is that, so is this language regular or not? The language for expressions. So we know that the language for variable names is regular, but is the language for expressions regular? Okay, yes, no, there's no answer. So can you define a regular expression for this language of expressions? So in fact, we have already seen in this lecture itself something about this language. Okay, so Vikram is asking as it is recursively defined. No, so that's not what I'm asking. Right? So what I'm asking is this language regular? So I'm not asking whether or not there is a recursive definition of this language. Right? So uh, as we have seen, right, that a language may have a recursive definition, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's regular, right? Like 0 to the power n and 1 to the power n has a recursive definition, but it is not regular. So I'm asking that is this language, the language of expressions in a programming language, is that language regular or not? So we know that, for example, right, uh, this variable names, right, they come from a regular language. Similarly, you can also define a regular language for this integers, right, positive integers. And so can you also define the regular language for the whole thing? So is the whole if you consider the set of all valid expressions, is that a regular language or not? See, for example, I already know that the set of variables, right? That's a regular language, right? So I can write this as a plus b, and then a plus b plus 0 plus 1 star. Okay. And this integers, right, positive integers, I can also write as a regular language. So I can write this as this 1 plus 2 plus 9, and then 0 plus 1 plus 9 whole star. And then maybe I can also define the symbols, right? So this plus and into are just symbols, right? So I can write them as this plus. Um, yeah, maybe I can define a regular expression, right? Uh, here as well, right? So I can, uh, so I can, for example, like uh, take any combination, right, of variable names and this positive integers, right? Uh, and along with any of these binary operators. Right? And then I can define a programming language, or rather I can define a regular expression, right, for that. So would that mean that is this a regular language? Okay, so that's correct, right? So Samuel Moses is saying that the brackets will not allow, right? So yeah, so that is the correct answer, right? So is this parenthesis, right, which are the problematic ones, right? So if you didn't have parenthesis, then you can actually express this in the form of a regular expression, right? Which would then mean that it would actually be a regular language, right? But as soon as you have this parenthesis, right, then you have to sort of match the number of opening brackets with the number of closing brackets, right? And that's the same as the 0 to the power n, 1 to the power n problem. So yeah, so that's why this is not a regular language, right? And it's because of the parenthesis that's not a regular language, right? However, we can define this recursively now, which means that we can write a context-free grammar for expressions in this language. Okay. So okay, so let's try to do this. Right? So let's try to write a regular, rather a context-free grammar for expressions in this language. Okay. So I can sort of define a string, right, or define an expression into multiple parts, right? Uh, so let's say that I use the symbol e, right, for an expression. So E is a variable, right? It's a non-terminal, which is going to express the set of expressions in this language, right, that we want. Uh, so yeah, right. The base case would be that E itself, right, can be either a variable, which is an identifier in the programming language, right, or it can be a positive integer, right? It can be a constant. Okay? So I will write the rules corresponding to that. Right? So I will use other variables for expressing this identifiers and constants. Right? So let's say that I use I for identifiers, and then I use C for constants. So this is the base case. Right? So we'll write down rules for I and C as well. But we know that these are both regular. I and C are both regular. Or rather, the strings that are represented by I and C, right, they correspond to regular. They correspond to a regular line. So what is the inductive case here? So given that E is a valid expression, right? I can then add it to expressions. Right? So E can generate E plus E, okay, which would again be a valid expression, and E can generate E into E, which is another valid expression, and then E can also generate this bracket E. So that is also another valid expression. So this would correspond to the inductive case, right, where we are generating more complex expressions out of a simple expression. Okay. And now let's also write down the rules for I and C. So I is this set of identifiers, right? So we know that these identifiers must begin with either a or small b, and then they can contain anything, right? So what would be a production rule for I? Maybe some of you can help me to write this. Okay, so Vinith is saying I generates A and B, okay, and then so this corresponds to the base case. Uh, but okay, and Vikram is saying that I can generate I and then okay, I and then A plus B, right? So note that plus, right? This plus is a regular expression, so that's not allowed uh, in, uh, in the formal syntax, right? So as we said, right? So formally, right? A grammar in a production rule, right? You can just have strings. So I can write this as IA or IB or I0 or I1. Yeah, this seems to. So yeah. So in order to generate any variable name, right? I will keep on using this production rules, right? And this inductive production rules. Right? Finally, in the base case, right? I will either start with an A or a B. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's do this for the constants as well. Okay. So these constants are positive integers. So we know that they should begin. They can either be zero, right, or they should begin with a non-zero number, a non-zero digit, right? And then they can have any arbitrary number of digits. Okay, so what would be the production rules for C? Okay, so Vinith is saying C can generate. Okay, so let's write this down. So 0, 1, or anything up to 9, and then okay, uh, and then C can generate C0 or C1 or dot up to C9. Okay, okay, so is this correct? Okay, so in the start, C won't include 0. Okay, so Kostab is asking that shouldn't it be 1C, 2C up to 9C? Okay, so let me write that down. Let me just cross this out. So this is the second suggestion, right? So it's that C should be 1C, 2C, up to 9C. Okay. So is this correct? Okay, so Vinith is asking, will it include 1001? Okay, so let's see, right? So I can use this production rule, right? So I can use C generates 1C, but then, yeah, so then I would have to instantiate it with 0, right? In which case I can't do 1001. So that's why this is also not correct. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, so let me just erase this. Okay, so I have another suggestion, which is that C generates 1, 2, up to 9, and then C generates C0, C1, dot, 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 up to C9. Okay, so is this correct? Okay, so this will just not include 0, but yeah. So how do I then modify it so that it also includes 0? So you can use another variable, right? Okay, so there is this variable d which can generate 0, but then in the original expression, right, I'm just using C. So I need to somehow relate the C and D to each other. So I can use another variable. Okay, that's fine. But then I need to relate these variables together as well, right? Yes, any suggestions? Okay, okay, I see. Okay, so then how should we do this? So anyone else? Okay, let's try this. Okay. So let me just erase this. Okay, so let's say that uh, I use two variables, right? So let's say I use this variable first and then rest. Uh, so I know that this first, right, uh, can only generate let's say 0 to and then this rest can generate everything. So is this going to work? So I think we should also include an epsilon. So let's say I also include epsilon, which is also a string. Yeah. So I say that this first can generate any number from 1 to 9, and it can also be epsilon, and then this rest can generate uh, R0 to R1 to R9, and then epsilon as well. So I can still generate 0. Uh, I can't begin with 0. So I think this seems right. Okay, F should not have epsilon. But okay, but then if I don't, okay, I see that F should not have epsilon because otherwise I run into the same issue. But if I don't include epsilon in F, right, uh, then I can't have 0. So you're right that F should not have epsilon, but if I don't include epsilon, then I run into the same issue, right? That I can't have 0. Okay. So this actually represents every string other than 0, right? Which was the same issue that we had earlier as well, right? So let's say that I can of course have just a D here, right? Which is what this is earlier, right? And then I can say that this D can only generate 0. Okay. So now, yeah. So this is what Vikram is suggesting as well. Yeah. So C can generate either FR or D, and then F can be 1 to 9, and then R can be this other strings, and then D can be 0. Yeah, so I think this seems correct. So I think we can generate 0, and we can also generate the rest of the strings. And obviously the answer that Vinit gave earlier, right? So that also had the same issue, right? It didn't have 0. So you can also add this other variable D there. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this seems right to me. Okay, so let's end this lecture today then. And we'll continue on Monday, right? So tomorrow we'll have the test, and as I said earlier, the syllabus of the test will not include this context-free grammars. So everything before that we did in the last couple of weeks, beginning from decision properties of regular languages. Okay, yeah. So thank you everyone, and that's the end of the lecture.